I'm Katie Osuna, and I'm the host of Copper and Heat Radio, a 2-time James Beard Award-winning podcast about the forces that shape our meals. I started this podcast back in 2019 when I was working in Michelin-starred restaurants and noticing all of these social interactions around me. I had a lot of questions about the culture of restaurants and the systems we operated in.
I think the restaurant world's in for a reckoning.
Restaurants are slow to change because everything's made on the smallest margins.
Value is completely arbitrary, right?
What began as a podcast to process my way through working in kitchens as a woman has grown.
If the conversation is a crackdown on the border, then do you want a $30 burger? Because that's one of the consequences of this.
There's just a certain financial reality to making certain businesses exist. And there's a reason that delivery didn't exist in a lot of markets for a lot of years. And it's because it's incredibly low margin.
How a cuisine climbs in prestige and value. This happened to Japanese cuisine. This happened to Italian cuisine right in front of our eyes.
Listen wherever you get your podcasts. And now on Heritage Radio Network.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
So you don't shun the devil with your rock and roll load. Knows that country music's gonna save your soul. The devil runs his groove in them rhythm and blues that sing. It's gonna get you some in the end.
Welcome back to the Speakeasy. I'm Sother Teague.
And I'm Greg Benson, and we have some breaking news.
That's
some
us,
news.
The Speakeasy. We're always your source of breaking booze news.
So this is news that actually broke right after we finished taping last week, which means that by the time this reaches your ears, this is 10-day-old news. This news is broken.
No one's going to listen to a show about last week's news.
Well, they're going to listen to our fresh takes about last week's news because this is the,
John Oliver show called?
What's up?
What's that John Oliver show called?
Oh, yeah, exactly. This is this is even better. This is the previous week before last week today with Greg and Sother. That's what this is. Anyway, the news, now that we've gotten the listener all hot and bothered about what exactly we're talking about, is I'm going to quote from what's actually a pretty good write-up from Food and Wine about this whole thing, and we'll link it in the show notes too. There is a class action lawsuit against Diageo, a company that we're both very good at spelling.
Yeah, we are.
Alleging that their tequilas, specifically Don Julio and Casamigos, are not 100% Blue Weber agave as advertised.
Oh, no.
I know. Quoting here from Food and Wine, the class action complaint filed in the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of New York alleges that, quote, an investigation of Casamigos and Don Julio tequilas has shown that they consist of significant concentrations of cane or other types of alcohol rather than pure tequila. Now, as I was reading this piece, because obviously I'm an agave head, this is near and dear to me. As I was reading this, the one thought that kept coming to mind for me was, what would Lou Bank say about this? And what he would probably say is, well, the problem isn't so much. Also, sorry about this impression, Lou, but also, since imitation is the highest form of flattery, you're welcome. The problem isn't even so much about the additives. The problem is the monoculture around the Blue Weber agave that people are using to create this tequila in the first place. Now, I agree with this. Otherwise, I wouldn't be quoting Lou in such a flattering way. But why is monoculture the problem? And it's the problem because you have this massive global industry that is built around not just the same plant, but clones of the same plant over and over and over again. Okay, so picture this. You're a farmer, you're in Jalisco, you open up the paper one day and you see that agave prices are skyrocketing and you think, holy shit, I'm going to make a killing. You start planting a whole bunch of agave. When it starts to pop, you plant those too. It takes 5 years to reach maturity. By the time it's old enough to harvest, everyone else has had the same brilliant idea that you have, and the price is through the floor. It's worthless. So nobody grows it anymore. Everyone goes home. They've lost a bunch of money. They plant something else. Then there's no one growing agave, and the prices go up again. So it's led to this very recurring boom and bust cycle in this plant that happens on a predictably unpredictable scale. Like, the price is going to fluctuate. You just don't really know when or for how much. And businesses don't like unpredictability. They like stability. Now, I'm not saying that anyone has done any of the things that are being alleged in this lawsuit. That is not for me to say. What I am saying is that in an industry that is based around one plant that is notoriously mercurial for the price it can fetch at market, I could see why that would incentivize companies to build in some fail safes that would allow them to put out a consistent product at a consistent price year over year over year. Not saying anyone did it, saying that there is an incentive structure that would lead people to do that. It's kind of like monoculture is the original sin of the tequila industry, in the way that, like, you can say to someone that slavery is kind of like the cause of all social problems in the United States. It's a wild oversimplification, so much so that it's almost not true. And yet, all of our problems do kind of lead back to that. Like, pretty much everything that's wrong with America kind of started there. It's the same thing with the monoculture in tequila. It's a wild oversimplification to say that everything that's wrong with the tequila industry can be traced back to the fact that it's one plant over and over and over again. And yet, it's kind of true.
I'm not as deep into the agave world as you are, and I do understand the monoculture issues that are going on and how they affect poorly both the land, the plants, and the communities. I understand all of that. But what you started this conversation off with is this lawsuit. I'm just curious, like, how this is going to go down and who's at fault here. Is it the CRT that's the issue? Is it Diageo that's the issue? Is it, just bad practices all around? Is there some shady dealings going on, some bribery? Like, I think the breaking news is if there's a lawsuit, the news will be what the lawsuit reveals.
Exactly. And, we're not lawyers here. I think anyone who listens to the show, even for like the last 30 seconds, can tell that. So we're not taking sides. We're not trying to say who's at fault. We have no idea. All of this is just allegations, and, everyone is involved is going to have their day in court.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that it harkens back to the problems that are created when you have this massive industry relying on not just the same plant species, but basically the same plant over
bananas.
and over
and
over again.
Right? We only eat the one banana now, right? And if the one banana has a problem, we're out of bananas.
Exactly.
And that's bananas. And speaking of bananas, what about oranges? I don't know.
What about, yeah, exactly. They're all part of this complete breakfast. Yeah,
there seems to be an orange tie coming up here.
There is a tie into oranges. Well, speaking of all of these fruits and other delicious things that we like, someone who makes delicious things at his bar in Midtown, we have Jonathan Adler joining us. He is the brains behind Shinji's, which actually just got a nod at 50 Best. So first of all, welcome. And second of all, congratulations, Jonathan. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, pleasure to be here. Thank you. And excited to speak with you this afternoon. Yeah.
Excited to have you in here, man. And I'm especially stoked because I talk to a lot of people. We talk to a lot of people on this show from all over the world, and as much as I love chatting with people about their bars in, Melbourne, Australia, or Reykjavik, or, we had the guys from Hero on in Nairobi a little while ago. Great conversation. I've never been to Nairobi, and I can't exactly bop over there and try it. I did get the chance to bop over to Shinji's and try it the other day, and I had a lovely time. I went with Matt Levy of the Covert Cocktail Club, friend of the pod here. Hung out with Bobby for a while, who is a real master of her craft, took amazing care of us, had some delightful drinks, had some, a little bit of a snack, had some bites to eat. I was getting ready to head out, and then I got a text from a friend of mine that said, hey, this is last minute, I know, but what are you doing? I have a spot at Shinji's for a media spot in an hour. So I took a little lap around the block. I put some buffalo wings in my face, so I wasn't going to be, going 10 cocktails deep on an empty stomach. And then I came back and had another wonderful reservation. I think, I had prepped I told Bobby, I was like, you're probably going to see me again in an hour. But I did wonder if some people that were sitting at the bar were looking at me like, is that the same guy? Is that the same dude that came back here
Nice.
I really loved it. It was a good time.
And
Both
you're not the
times
only
in the
one.
same day, it was a
Yeah.
good time.
Yeah,
Does
glad
that
you're
happen
not the only
frequently
one who
to a
does
lot of
that.
people? Really?
About once every few weeks, we'll see someone at the very beginning of service. They'll go to dinner and then they'll come back because they had such a good time. They're like, oh, we want to get a drink afterwards. And what's the point of going to another place if I had such a good time here in the first place? And I really like to see that, and I'm kind of a creature of habit too, in terms of my, the places that I go out to eat and go out to drink as well. So, I can appreciate that.
That's a great business model. You're literally getting them coming and going, right? They come in, they have a drink, they go into the back and have dinner, they come back out and have another drink. Seems perfect. Listen, I want to talk a little bit about what you and I have something in common, right? We're both culinary school graduates. So you're sort of, and then, but you went on and then became a certified sommelier, right? And now you're behind the bar. Like, that's the triple threat in our game. Talk a little bit about how those experiences have led you to being the leader of what's now, one of the world's most recognized bars.
So, yes, I did cook for quite some time in my career. Spent the majority of it in New York City. I moved here in 2009. Went to culinary school at ICE, which used to be located right near here on 23rd Street. I did
Mhm.
work in several kitchens over here. And then my career really changed when I moved to San Francisco and worked at a restaurant called Cezanne, which was 2 Michelin stars at
Yeah.
the time. The year that I was there, we went from 2 to 3 stars. Really opened my eyes to what hard work actually means. There's a difference between saying like I work really hard at my job and being pushed to your limits. Um, it's nothing you really see in the industry today. We're talking over 10 years ago, when I think we all can agree the industry was a very different time. Uh, Business
Mhm.
practices, labor practices weren't ideal, and that's not what I would recommend to anyone. Owning a
Yeah.
restaurant or a bar these days, you can't treat your employees with disrespect, but at the same time, I wouldn't be in the place where I am today without that appreciation for hard work. So
Yes, this
the other
strange
thing that
double-edged
really
sword, right?
brought
Like, yeah.
yeah, it's like if you look at any people working in or performing at the highest level, like especially athletes, right? They're truly pushed to the brink, by their coaches, by their teammates, and all that. And if you got an inside look, like inside baseball, and like what's going on behind the scenes, most people would probably be horrified. But at the same time, there's a great appreciation for professional sports and movies, music, all these things where the people performing at the highest levels are, you know, getting pushed this hard. But the other thing that I really appreciated when I was working at Cezanne was that the restaurant, the kitchen itself, was an open kitchen, meaning it was in the actual dining room. So it was the first time working that hard that I also got to directly see the guest interaction, the guest appreciation for what I was doing. And it
Mhm.
also showed me that people had a genuine curiosity about all the hard work that I was putting in. I think you can agree with me, Sother, that one of the worst parts of being a cook is if you're curious and you're creative, it doesn't really suit you very well being a cook, because to be a cook in a professional kitchen, your job is to really just do the same task over and over the most efficiently way possible, without saying a word, without lifting your head up, without questioning anything. And yes, you get very good at your job, but at the same time, there's not much room for growth when it comes to a curiosity for things.
Yeah.
So I did eventually open my own restaurant where I'm from in Massachusetts. And I was the chef there, but I also got to participate in the bar program as well as the front of house and training the service staff and interacting with the guests and all that. And I'd always had an interest in cocktails, but it was my first time really seeing that as a bartender, it's kind of the ultimate hospitality position, because you get the discipline and the creativity that come from working in the kitchen, but you also get to have the knowledge and the gratification of serving guests, and having that instant reaction from them. There's not really many other professions where you can create something and then from the point of inception to the point of kind of having it be received, that you get to see it every single step of the way. And also with, bartending from a behind the scenes standpoint, a managerial standpoint, it's a lot more of a balance in terms of managing finances and managing personalities and staff and owners' expectations and all of those things. So um, I truly believe that all of these different experiences I've had have really been beneficial to me being in the position that I am now.
Yeah, of course, and I wholeheartedly agree with the notion that, as you said, when I'm behind the bar, I'm part of the process from beginning to end, and I'm also part of the process to the level that the guest wants. Right? If they want me to tell them where this vermouth came from and how vermouth is made, or what is vermouth, I'll give all that information freely. But if they want me to drop the drink and walk away, I drop the drink and walk away. Right? You have to read the guest and understand that as well. You then went on to get certified at the Court of Master Sommeliers. I don't know. I saw in the notes. Talk a little bit about like what was the impetus for that? Other than just broadening and deepening your knowledge base. Like again, I jokingly said triple threat at the top. Like, why do you want to pack all of that into one package?
So after I owned my own restaurant, it didn't work out too well. I was about 28 years old at the time, and the partners I had, I didn't know as well as I should have. There wasn't enough money put into marketing and the things that, really drive business in those first few years. Um, so I had the opportunity to come onto the team of the restaurant that had just opened up in Sonoma County called Single Thread. I'd worked with a couple of people that were on the front of house team from both Cezanne as well as Contra, where I worked at in Manhattan. So when I first got there, what I quickly realized was I was kind of overcooking, which was unfortunate because I just started on this amazing team that, at the time had 0 Michelin stars, but quickly got 3 Michelin stars. But I also saw there to be an opportunity there. And I had a discussion with both the chef de cuisine as well as the front of house team, general manager, beverage director, all of that, letting them know that I was interested in joining the beverage team. They also had a non-alcoholic program at the time, which this was back in 2017. Non-alcoholic programs weren't really a thing back then, especially in terms of pairings for high-end fine dining restaurants. So I kind of saw that as an opportunity to, you know, make the jump from back of house to front of house. A lot of people do it very slowly, but this was kind of an extreme case. So over a period of about 6 months, I would literally, it was like training for a marathon. I would wake up at 6 in the morning every day, go for a run, go to the gym, be back at my apartment at 8 a.m. And then for 4 hours straight, I would study wine. Then I would go to work at noon. I'd get off at about midnight. And then I would do tastings with the Psalms. And then I'd come back home and I'd study for another hour. And I did that for about 6 months straight. And then I, um, took my certified sommelier exam, and I was lucky to be one of 10 people out of the 50 people in the class that took the exam to pass. And, I was granted access onto the beverage team at a 3 Michelin star restaurant. And, that really changed my reality in a lot of ways. First of all, because I was immediately making at least twice as much money as I was before. And I was also around a lot of people that were curious and interested and constantly talking about their craft and what they were doing on a daily basis rather than just performing tasks. Um, and what I quickly realized from being a sommelier was that the biggest part of your job is to understand how to download extremely complex information and then be able to weave it into an experience for a guest in a way that they can easily understand. And just like you said, Sother, before, you quickly understand how to read the guest and read the room and understand when it's time to bring out all the little details that you're curious about and when it's time to just kind of turn on that charm and professionalism and be as hospitable and kind and welcoming as possible. Um, and I think it's kind of instrumental in what we do in terms of being hospitality professionals to be able to understand how to be hospitable, both with the things that we're interested in, but being able to intertwine that with the things that the guests are joining you for what their interests are.
Well, Shinji's is a pretty high concept spot. And I want to get into, you busted your ass and became an amazing chef, cook. You use the word cook. I'm going to use the word chef because of, that's what the tire people say. Then you became a sommelier. And then you decided to open a cocktail bar and you decided like, you know what, I'm going to go in a completely different direction. And I want to hear that origin story. But before we do that, because this is a spot that you've built here where I'm sure you get a mix of people who want to go into the deep dives of like how you make all of the stuff behind the bar, and people who just probably pop in or like, hey, can I have a seat? Or just, heard this was a good spot and made a reservation and just kind of want to, have a drink and then turn back and have a conversation with their date. What is the percentage of that? Like, what would you say the split is between, as you were saying, the people that want to do those deep dives and the people that just kind of want you to be like, here you go, folks, have a good night?
Well, it's quite interesting, that there's a large demographic of people. And it's not just the guests who are on first dates or second dates or what have you, and are really focused on their conversation that don't necessarily want that information. There is a large sector of people who are cocktail enthusiasts that do not want interactions. And it's actually a very specific demographic of people. It's young Asian college students, between the ages of like 22 to 24. And it's a bizarre phenomenon. There's this social media app called Little Red Book. And the only reason I say this is this happens multiple times on a nightly basis. They'll come in, they'll pull out this app and show you on the phone the pictures that other people have posted of the drinks, and then they'll ask you to bring those over. They don't want you to talk about it anyway, and they're just sitting there taking pictures, enjoying their drinks, taking off as many boxes as they can. And they're great guests in terms of I guess their intrigue and interest in being here. But it's counterintuitive to what people picture in their mind in terms of cocktail enthusiasts, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a bit of cocktail tourism. People just want to come in and get the thing and, take it off the box and say, I went to Shinji's and I had the orange or whatever, right? And they're fine. Like they come through the bars. They want to get the Adamaro Sazerac. They want to get the Sharpie mustache in the flask. I get it. It's all good. The money's still good. But they seem a little bit less invested in what the product is and more invested in what the experience is, which that's great too. That's part of hospitality, right? Experience. So let's talk a little bit about that. Like, let's talk about how you use the word intertwine. I love it. How you intertwine all of these pretty radical and cool techniques, both both visually and of course flavor wise. But then the bar is quite a hospitable place. I've been to Shinji's twice, and both times I've had an amazing time. So talk about how you really design the menu, and the current menu just changed, so you can talk about that too. How you really design the menu to be both beautiful and delicious, but also really wrap it together with the hospitality that you serve.
So I think it's always important to understand where Shinji's, I think there's a good place to talk about the origin story of Shinji's. So Shinji's is not a standalone bar. It's located in front of an 8-seat sushi omakase restaurant called Noda. So Noda has been in existence since 2018. It used to be located on 28th Street, 8 blocks north of us, right near where the old Nomad Hotel is, and across the street from now where the Fifth Avenue Hotel and Portrait Bar are. So Shinji's was opened, or sorry, let me backtrack. Noda was opened back then, and it's, the star of the show is Shigeyuki Tsunoda, who is our chef back there. So Shinji's is named after a man named Shinji Nohara. We're all familiar with Anthony Bourdain. If you watch the very first episode of television he ever did, it was on a TV show called The Cook's Tour. It's him and this man, Shinji Nohara, who's showing him around Tokyo to all of these places that if you're a Westerner, you just won't have access to in Japan. If you've never been to Japan or specifically Tokyo before, There's a lot of specific, rules that are kind of in place in Japanese culture that tourists just wouldn't necessarily understand, and the Japanese just don't have patience for them to try and understand. So what they do is they just don't advertise a lot of these places that the rules and the culture is extremely strict. Um, but Anthony Bourdain wanted to see these places. So Shinji, who at the time was a food journalist, showed him around to these different places. And a lot of chefs saw that episode and they got in touch with Shinji for him to be able to show them these places as well. So eventually Shinji made a business out of this. So he will take anyone who, will pay him a daily rate and cover his expenses to different places. They don't have to necessarily be fancy places, but just places that you would not be able to find if you were a tourist or a Westerner or someone who didn't know. So when our partners who are responsible for Noda and Shinji's were looking for a chef, Shinji is the person who introduced them to our chef at Noda. So we did relocate Noda in 2021 to its current location on 20th Street between 5th and 6th, with the intention of opening up the cocktail bar that is now Shinji's in front of it. So the reason we call it Shinji's is we're naming it after the man who's not only responsible for Noda, but he is also responsible for opening up doors to possibilities that not only you wouldn't be able to experience otherwise, but are also unexpected. So when it comes to Shinji's, we are an 18-seat cocktail bar in front of a very fancy omakase, but we don't take ourselves too seriously in terms of being stuck up or being too buttoned up. When it comes to our drinks, they are focused on extremely high-end modern technique, but all of that is really just to bring people through the door. Once you come in here, I think where we really shine is the hospitality and what we bring to our guests in terms of our interaction and our service. But when it comes to the menu itself and the drinks, yes, they're very high and technique oriented. So the new menu is now kind of broken up into sections. The first section of the cocktails are experimental shots. So one of those is a drink that has always been on the menu since we opened. It's called the hot cold toddy. So this drink is modeled after a dish that is served at the 3 Michelin star restaurant in England called the Fat Duck. There it is served as a tea course, an intermezzo between savory and sweet courses, where your tongue is bifurcated, one half hot and the other half cold at the same time. So the person who was responsible for helping develop this is Kyle Connaughton, who is the chef and owner of Single Thread. So when I took over the non-alcoholic beverage program at Single Thread, I told Kyle I want to do, the hot cold tea for the, the beverage pairing to do the same thing where it's, an intermezzo between the savory and sweet dishes. And he said, okay, well, I've got the book for the Fat Duck cookbook upstairs. Why don't you read it and you can figure it out? So I did it. And I told him, oh, well, this didn't work at all. He's like, well, the ratios are off on it. They don't want people to exactly replicate. So you're going to have to figure it out for yourself. So it took about 3 months of trial and error. And then eventually I figured it out. And then when it came time to, do the beverage program at Shinji's, I was like, this would be really cool if we applied alcohol to it. But when you do that, you have to really change a lot of the ratios once again, because you're dealing with alcohol, which really messes things up when it comes to hydrocolloids and Brix levels and everything. But eventually we developed into the hot cold toddy, and it's consistently the highest selling item on the menu. It's really a great introduction to what we do.
Fascinating.
Anyone who gets it, it's a great kind of notion that this isn't just your average cocktail bar. This isn't just your average experience. But once and again, not just because of what's inside the glass, but because of everything that's going on around you while you're here in this room.
Yeah, it was. I got it just sort of dropped off right when I first arrived at the bar last week, which was a very lovely gesture. And it does do a wonderful job of sort of priming you of the experience to come, right? Because it's served in a teacup. and it has this little sort of barrier, and then the barrier is removed and you have to drink it so that you can still get that sensation of half of the drink is hot and half of the drink is cold. But it is a sensation unlike anything I've ever really experienced before, which is a sentence I don't get to say very often. I've lived a very long and lucky life in the bar industry, and I've gotten to try a lot of really wild shit. So the fact that like this experience of half my tongue is hot, half my tongue is cold, my poor upright 8 brain is struggling with this, but it's still a very pleasant sensation, was entirely net new to me. And I really enjoyed it. And that was a primer of what was to come for the rest of the night. It was an eye opener of, don't expect this to be run of the mill. And that was further enforced with the next drink that I got, one that we sort of teased earlier, and one that I think is a good encapsulation of your high technique, but welcoming and playful philosophy you were talking about, which is the Tropicana. Can you tell us a little bit about what the Tropicana is?
Yeah, so the Tropicana is modeled after the late '80s orange juice commercial where the lady takes the red and white straw and pushes it through the real orange and drinks out of it. So, I set out to say, well, let's make that happen. But at the same time, everything we do at Shinji's is for a purpose. It's not just for show. It's not just for realizing like, oh, like this is like TikTok clickbait or whatever. Everything has a genuine purpose with it. So when it comes to the Tropicana, the drink is actually inside the orange. Now, we don't pre-make the drink inside the orange, but the vessel is a frozen orange, which is a 2-day process to make. So the first day, we cut the bottom of the orange off, we scoop it out with a grapefruit spoon, and then we kind of leave it to kind of air dry in the walk-in fridge, which just kind of helps firm it up. So that way, the next day we fill it up with a water balloon because the orange has been kind of air dried for that period of time. It allows the balloon to expand a little bit further to be able to hold the entire drink inside. And then we place the orange with the water balloon inside of a blast freezer. So a blast freezer works like a regular freezer in the same way that a convection oven works like a regular oven. So it circulates the air inside it. So normally cold air condenses, so it's going to be colder on the bottom of the freezer than the top. So when we first opened and we tried this using a standing freezer, we realized that there are different pockets within the freezer. Ones would be colder, ones would be warmer. So you'd get oranges that would burst at the table, and then you'd get oranges that would be way too solid and wouldn't hold enough drink. So eventually we invested in this blast freezer, which circulates the air inside. So because water freezes directionally, it forms a sphere of ice around it, just like when you're, making clear ice inside a Coleman cooler or whatever. The orange itself acts as the insulation. And after about 45, 50 minutes, we pull it out. We take a little punch out of the side of the hole with a little metal punch, and then we push a hot soldering iron through. So it allows us to create a hole right through the sphere of ice, and then we dump all of the water out. We save the insides for another drink that's on the menu now, and then the orange vessel gets put in the fridge, and then when it comes time to make the order, we shake up the cocktail and we pour it inside. The cocktail itself, the challenge of that was to have it reminiscent of what you would think the orange tasted like. So, like you being able to stick a straw through an orange and taste it. It's not as simple as just pouring, alcohol with orange juice, because a screwdriver is kind of a very unbalanced drink. Um, and the other interesting thing is that you had to like kind of play with the texture of all of the spirits and the alcohol and stuff because you wanted um, it to kind of be reminiscent of pulpy orange juice at the same time. So it took a lot of experimentation, but the flavor profile that we landed on was kind of orange creamsicle, like a Flintstones push pop or something. And then we added a little bit of a note of thyme in there as well, just because that tertiary note, you have orange and vanilla as like primary and secondary notes, and then you need a little bit of a tertiary note just to keep you coming back and saying, oh, there's something that I can't quite put my finger on, and it intrigues you. But at the end of the day, yes, it's beautiful, but the best thing about it is no one wants to drink warm orange juice. So because the drink is inside the orange, it won't dilute the drink, but at the same time, it's keeping it cold for the entirety of the experience of drinking it.
And it looks beautiful too. It's served in kind of like a
so whimsical and fun. Yeah.
It's literally just a orange with two very nice green leaves, and then the red and white striped straw that anyone who is an 80s or 90s kid is gonna you're conjuring this up in your mind. For all the Zoomers out there listening to this, I don't know, Google it, but it really is a whimsical looking thing. But this brings me to a big question that I wanted to ask you, because, clearly this is not an easy drink to make. This is a lot of work, and it is not unique on your menu. We've talked about two of them. There were, forgive me if I'm getting the number wrong, it was close to 20 drinks on your menu, correct?
Yeah, we've got 24 drinks on our menu right now.
Whoa.
Yeah, and all of them seem very high technique, very labor intensive, very molecular mixology. And I wonder if that is a trend that is maybe part of a bygone era. Like, I remember the first time I went to the aviary, it was the 2010s. The economy was doing great. We were all patting ourselves on the back for electing Barack Obama twice. Like, it was a time where we could indulge in these things that were just the peak of visual and culinary craft that clearly took a really, really long time and were labor intensive, and that you could never, ever, ever, ever just whip up in your kitchen by yourself. And now a lot of the conversations that we're having, because we're in a very, I think, different time with different vibes, a lot of the conversations we're having on this show are about, well, how do we make these bars into welcoming spaces? And a $30 cocktail says a lot of things, but it doesn't necessarily say, hey, you, come on in off the street, have a drink. And so I'm wondering, I am not against this idea. Obviously, I went in, I had a lovely time, and I'm already looking forward to going back. But I am wondering, why open a molecular mixology bar now? What you think the market is for it, and whether you feel like you're moving on from some of those trends that I mentioned in the aviary and those molecular mixology bars of a bygone era. If you're doing something that is different and is of this moment and is more kind of, hey, come on in, have a seat, we'll make you a drink.
So what I would say is there's a big difference, I think, between those places like the area that you spoke of. I think you could group existing conditions to a certain extent in there as well.
Booker and
Where
Dax, Bar Contra,
yeah, where a lot
all the
of what's
Arnold
going
led spots.
yeah, where a lot of what's going on there is a lot of it is look how impressive I am versus let's make sure that you have an amazing time. We have regulars that come in here that I have never spoken to once about all the techniques that go into the drinks and whatnot. The reason they keep coming back is because of the amazing experience. Now, when it comes to Shinji's, it is a very small space, 18 seats, right? And we made it that way because we are in front of a very small, intimate omakase. It wouldn't make any sense to make this a party bar, a volume bar, or anything. So, at a certain point, you need to make sure that the business makes financial sense. So we can't be serving $20 cocktails to an 18-seat bar. The bar would close down immediately. So we have to be serving things at a higher price point because there's a higher premium for the real estate within the space. To justify that, we need to be giving something extra to the guest. And that is why I needed to make sure that we were putting as much attention and detail into the cocktails as possible. I could have done that by buying extremely expensive glassware. Our glasses aren't cheap, but they're not the most expensive glasses out there. I could have done that by, just throwing caviar on top of every single piece of food. But that doesn't do the guests service who want to come in and they want to try delicious drinks. I need to make sure that this is a financially viable place, but also at the same time, it's catering to people who want to experience what we have to offer. Now, when it comes to the drinks themselves, the way that they're constructed, I'm just doing things based off of my background and what I feel comfortable doing. I just as much as I enjoy classic cocktails, which is what I normally order when I go out to eat, and drink. If I was in a different space, a bigger venue with more seats, I probably would lean into the classics more. It just doesn't make sense when it comes to this space itself. But the thing that I think that really speaks volumes about Shinji's is that people come in, they talk about the cocktails, they talk about the food, but the thing that they talk about the most is the team and the warm service that we have. And it's really easy to get people to rally behind having amazing hospitality and learning those skills when they're just as dedicated to the craft of making the cocktails themselves. When they're spending hours making the different infusions and garnishes and batches and all the things that go into making each drink, there's a sense of pride that's within that. So when they go to actually serve the guest, even if the guest isn't interested in it, they're going to be excited about being here and about doing what they're doing on a daily basis.
Yeah, I can totally understand that. I was on the opening team at Booker and Dax, and I get all of that. And I was a chef as well. So, bringing those techniques to the front of the house are a lot of fun, and they do generate a lot of curiosity. My curiosity comes right away when you say we had to buy a blast freezer just for this one drink. How many of those drinks did you have to sell to justify purchasing a blast freezer? You know what I mean?
At the same
How
time,
many of those Tropicanas had to go out the door?
We don't use an ice machine anymore because we have a blast freezer. So what we're able to do is we fill up fish tubs. If you're familiar with fish tubs, they're like 2 by 1 foot plastic tubs up with water, and within 1 hour we have solid blocks of ice that we can just chip down. How many times have you worked at a restaurant or a bar and you're just throwing money in the trash because you're constantly fixing your KD machine, right? So we figure out other ways. Yes, the blast freezer was super expensive because all of our drinks are pre-batched and take very little time. We squeeze all of our citrus fresh to order, so there's no waste of citrus at the end of the night
Great.
either. We know exactly how much we're going to squeeze. So yes, there was a lot of there was a big cost when we came to opening things, but we're extremely sustainable in terms of our finances, in terms of the production of the actual cocktails, and on service from a day-to-day basis as well.
Yeah, I love that. I love that approach to like trimming down maybe equipment and maintenance costs. But at the same time, and I know, and obviously I run a very small bar myself. Like I know how like that contributes to punching down the bottom line. But it seems to me, there's still some balance that has to be struck when you know that the techniques that are going into this are labor intensive, right? And then that you can't escape, right? It's still going to take a lot of man hours to make these things happen. And 24 drinks on a cocktail menu that only seats at a cocktail bar that only seats 18, right? Seems like it's just got to be a lot to juggle.
Yeah, I mean, I've figured out ways to trim down on labor as well. We started with a very specific team, a robust team, and at this point, I am not only the beverage director, but I'm the de facto general manager and de facto chef as well. Meaning we have set recipes. I do all of the ordering. If the kitchen needs any help with anything, I'm not going to physically go down there and start cooking food, but I've made the menu streamlined in a way where we can run with one cook and one porter who flexes between, cooking and washing dishes and glassware during service. When it comes to all of the scheduling and the payroll and the hiring and firing and all of the admin and finances and balancing P&Ls and all those things, that's me who's doing all of that stuff. So, that definitely cuts down on the labor, and it allows us to pay our bar staff higher hourly wage to be able to do these production shifts. So they're the people who are involved in it as well, and it allows them to talk specifically about what they're doing. There's a lot of these high concept places that have a dedicated prep or production person, and then there's a disconnect between the people who are serving the drinks and those who are making them. Everyone who works here
100%.
goes through they go through a very rigorous, regimented kind of training program. And it's not after at least a minimum of 6 months that they even start getting to do production, because that's the most important part of our program by far.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I love for me personally, like and I think Sother and I are both grooving on this as people who know the industry and can kind of see the way the sausage is made. Like we, noticing all of this stuff, noticing, Bobby explained to me, like, well, we don't have an ice machine because we have all of these other ways of, cooling and chilling and freezing the things that need to be cooled and chilled and frozen. And so that cuts down on, the cost, as you said, of maintaining and repairing an ice machine, while I'm sure also making it a lot more intellectually interesting for everyone that works there. I had a drink. People who know me know that I'm a huge carrot fan. It is a load-bearing part of my personality is that I love carrots. And so you had sort of a carrot cake inspired drink on the menu that I had that had the carrot greens on top of it. And anytime I see carrot greens on a menu, I get so happy because there's so much flavor in those things. And the fact that 99.9% of the time they wind up in the trash, I think is a travesty. So I, as someone who is in the industry, can see all of the ways that this is, saving money by being inventive, by coming up with new ways to do it. I guess my concern, though, is I wonder if from the outside, this molecular mixology concept, this very high technique thing, feels like a barrier to some people. And I'm wondering if that is that something that kind of keeps you up at night, or is that something that you've found ways to work around? Or alternatively, are you like, look, I mean, yes, we're not a budget spot. That's not the niche in the ecosystem that we're going for. I guess I just wonder what part of your brain that takes up.
I mean, I think you're absolutely correct there. We aren't part of that niche. We're located in front of an 8-seat sushi counter that is $400 per person. I think it would be absolutely bizarre if we were doing anything but a high-end spot. I know that at 11 Madison Park, for instance, they just opened up Clemente Bar. It would be absolutely bizarre if you went upstairs to Clemente Bar and it was a, party spot that was doing volume. You need to
pickleback specials
read the room, I guess, right? Yeah, you need to read the room, and that this is what it makes sense, especially since our guests for Noda walk through Shinji's to get to their seating at Noda. It has to be a cohesive space.
Of course. Yeah, of course. I think a quick way to like sum it up is, there's a seat in the pantheon for everything and everyone, right? We can talk about this over a fish dinner. We can go to Noda or we can go to McDonald's. They both serve fish, right? So like the comparison is like everything belongs. It's just what are we buying into tonight, right? I love the concept and I love what you're doing there, and I'm excited to come and check out the new menu. You want to talk a little bit about like maybe some of the techniques that you're involving on the new menu, or maybe even specifically some of the drinks?
Yeah, definitely. It's very exciting. We just launched it last night. Extremely great reception. We had a lot of friends from the industry come in to try things out. One of the really cool new drinks that we have is this shot. It's an M&M shot, but it's a frozen M&M shot. So, that was a big thing for me. A big thing for me always is try and figure out something that most people would think is impossible and then make it possible. So on the first menu, we had our 5-second Ramos Gin Fizz, a Ramos Gin Fizz with a 5-second shake, which you can still get. So this one was, how do we take alcohol and we freeze it so people can take like a frozen shot? So it's a split base of Maro Montenegro and Derumbe's San Luis Potosi mezcal. It's amazing Salmiana mezcal. And then we take the orange innards from the Tropicanas and we grill them off until they're charred on the outside, and we juice it. So we mix all three of those components together, and then we stabilize it with something that's called Guar and Capicaraginin. They're typically used as sorbet stabilizers, but essentially they thicken and lower the bricks of the medium, so it allows you to freeze them. we put them into these canisters. They're called Paco Jet canisters, typically used to make ice cream. Freeze them solid, and then put it into a machine with blades that kind of process it down and make it smooth. Put that mixture into a piping bag, and then we pipe it into these molds that are silicone molds stamped with the word Shinji's on it. We place that into the blast freezer, and then after about 10 minutes, pop them out, keep them in containers, transfer them to our service freezer, which is at a lower temperature. So when you get it in front of you, it's just like a little brick, a little orange brick, but you taste it and you actually get like the ethanol on your palate. It's like a little bit boozier than, a slushy drink or something, but it's that frozen texture. It's another thing where people are like, whoa, like I'd never thought I could experience something like this before. And low entry, point in terms of cost, it's $10 for a shot. I think that's about what the going rate for a shot is now in New York City. So it's a great way to start or end your experience and, lean into the, I guess, technique side of things, but not be too, over people's heads with it and still be fun with it as well.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a lot of fun. The menu just launched last night, so I guess, Greg, you didn't get to try that one.
No, that literally, I think, got teased on your Instagram the day after I was in, and I was still kind of basking in the afterglow of a very lovely cocktail experience. And I saw that, and I was like, "Oh, damn it!" It's like that looks delightful.
Reasons
so I guess
to
I just have to
return.
go back. I
Exactly.
have to get two more friends to book two different seatings in the same night so I can try it, maybe twice.
Let's just you and me go. We'll book twice. You book
Great.
one, I'll book one. We'll just
Awesome.
stay.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Well, man, this has been a great conversation, and I, already a fan of the bar. Now even more so, and I get to hear a little bit more about what goes on behind the scenes and everything that you're doing up there, and just this sort of dedication that you've put in, to be that triple threat that I talked about before: a chef, a somm, and now a bartender. So it just means I'm gonna have to come up to Shinji's soon. This is the opportunity you've got right now to maybe do a little plugging. How can people follow along with your shenanigans at Shinji's?
So you can follow me at John Serves Drinks on Instagram, or if you want to follow Shinji's and what we're doing there, it's Shinji's Bar or shinjisbar.com for our website.
Yeah.
Awesome. And do give them a follow on Instagram too, because the cocktails are, well, they're also shot by the one and only Joanna Lynn. So of course they look good, and I imagine they taste good as well. So a lot of good content on there. And a lot of good content behind your bar. So thank you so much for coming on the show and talking with us. And thank you for all the delightful drinks, man. It's been a real pleasure.
My absolute pleasure. Thanks for taking the time.
Awesome. Well, that is going to do it for us this week on the Speakeasy. But if that wasn't enough, if you want more from the hosts here, you can subscribe to our YouTube page.
That's right.
You can see what we actually look like. Individual results may vary.
Yeah, my unshaven face since I've been out of work.
Oh yeah, you've got your sort of Wolfman thing going in there, Sother.
Yeah.
And if you want to see how out of control Sother's beard is, you can follow us, subscribe to our YouTube page. It is youtube.com/@speakeasy.podcast. And if that still isn't enough, just like your absolutely unquenchable thirst for Damon, Sother, and me, you can become a regular on our Patreon.
That's right.
There you're going to get sponsor-free listening, bonus content, cocktail recipes from all our guests, a free cocktail kit each month from our good friends at Shaker and Spoon. And for the next month, our regulars can get free tickets to our upcoming 600th episode extravaganza live from BCB. Everyone else has to pay $2 human for tickets, but you,
That's right,
our beloved regulars, do not have to go through that hassle, so reserve your spot today. It's going to be at Fort Hamilton Distilling in Industry City, 12 noon on Tuesday, June 10th. We're going to have drinks. We're going to have a celebrity guest, and
big celebrity.
Sother, a unnamed celebrity. And it's been
celebrity.
Really fun promoting this event because every week I tell the listeners just a little bit more about it, and it seems from the outside, I think, like I'm very carefully and deliberately rationing out information in order to build intrigue. But what's actually happened is I've just planned it slightly more each time we go on air. So I have just a little bit more to say.
Info,
I know these seem like they're like carefully rationed out bits of information as part of a master plan, but really like I just did my job a little bit more. These aren't drops. It's real-time updates from the field. So tune in next week to see what I've gotten off my ass and done since then.
Yeah.
And finally, speaking of next week, I just want to quickly plug Tuesday the 20th. We've had a date change. So it's Tuesday the 20th now is our next installment of After Dark Confessions at Someday Bar on Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn. It's confessions from strangers, and you can be one of those strangers read aloud by me and my co-host. It's all anonymous unless you win, and we're sponsored by Beyblade and Widow Jane, so our prizes are actually pretty good. They don't suck. There's no recording, no TikToks,
Whiskey
no
and sex
podcasts.
toys.
Yeah, exactly. What else do you want? I am finally sponsored by a liquor brand and a sex shop. So really, I kind of feel like I've peaked.
Yeah.
So come out and see what that looks like. Tuesday, May 20th, 7:30 p.m. And be sure to tune in next week for episode 599.
Wow.
When our guest is going to be Jackie Williams, fittingly enough, who is the brains behind BCB.
Yeah.
So we're going to be giving all sorts of sneak previews. Maybe we're even going to tell you who our celebrity guest is. I don't know. You'll have to tune in and find out. But that is going to do it for us this week. So for now, until next time, cheers, everybody.
Cheers, guys.
So you don't shun the devil with your rock.
The Speakeasy is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food and drink radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org/subscribe.
I'm Jessica Badalana, staff editor at King Arthur Baking Company.
And I'm David Tamarkin, King Arthur's editorial director.
And this is Things Bakers Know, a new podcast from King Arthur where we explore every corner of the baking world.
Every episode of Things Bakers Know dives deep into a different baked good, its history and lore,
trends, takes, and opinions.
A lot of opinions, and plenty of tips and tricks.
Plus, we'll always leave time to answer your home baking questions.
Along the way, we break bread with the best bakers, historians, and restaurateurs in America, and we always get their expert advice.
So join us at King Arthur as we celebrate the wide world of baking on Things Bakers Know.
Out now wherever you listen. Subscribe now so you won't miss an episode.
Head to kingarthurbaking.com/podcast to learn more. That's kingarthurbaking.com/podcast.
And until then, please, people, remember to follow the recipe.